I watched two police officers walk into my sister's Sweet 16. The DJ stopped. The cake went untouched, and my mother, who had not come to my graduation, stood frozen under the lights she had bought with my stolen identity. I was not even there. I did not need to be. 3 months before that night, I was standing alone in a stadium full of strangers holding a diploma no one had come to see. 3 months later, my name was being read aloud inside a banquet hall, not to celebrate me, but to expose her. This is how it happened. The ceremony was on a Saturday in May. I had bought a new dress. Nothing expensive, just something that felt like it meant something. I had texted Mom the week before saying the ceremony starts at 10 and that I had saved 3 seats in Section C, Row 4. She said, "We will try." I told myself "we will try" meant yes. It did not. When my name was called, Camilla Elaine Reed, I walked across that stage with my spine straight and my eyes forward. I had practiced not crying in the car on the way there. The practice worked. The 3 empty seats in Section C did not. A girl named Ruby found me in the courtyard afterward. Her parents were behind her, and her dad had a balloon that said "Graduate" in gold letters. She asked where my family was, and I smiled and said they were running late. She believed me. I had years of practice making that lie sound true. I drove home in silence. No music, just the sound of the highway and the weight of a master's degree no one had witnessed. That night, my diploma sat on the kitchen table, still in its envelope. I did not hang it up. Not yet. 3 days later, not a congratulations, not a call, not even an emoji. My phone lit up with a message from Mom. She said she needed $2,100 for Avery's Sweet 16 and that the venue deposit was due Friday. I read it 4 times. Not because I did not understand it, but because I needed my brain to confirm that it was real. There was no, "Sorry we missed it," and "No, we are so proud of you." Just a number and a deadline, and that same quiet assumption that I would say yes because I always said yes. I thought about the Starbucks apron I wore at 6 a.m. when I was 16, sending half my tips home because Avery needed piano lessons. I thought about the college fund that was supposed to be mine that quietly became hers. I thought about Ruby's dad and his gold balloon, and I felt something I had not felt in years. Not anger, but clarity. I opened my banking app, typed $1, added a note that said, "Congrats on the party," and hit send. Then I called a locksmith. That was the beginning of the end for her. The locksmith arrived within the hour. He was an older man with a soft voice and tools that clinked when he walked. When the new lock clicked into place, I stood there breathing in the smell of metal and oil. It was the first boundary I had ever built in my life. It felt like architecture. The next morning, with coffee and sunlight and silence that was actually mine, my phone lit up with 2 police officers in the hallway. My mother had called them and told them I was acting erratically and changing locks and not answering calls, and that she was worried I might harm myself. The officers stepped inside and looked around. My laptop was open, and my diploma was on the wall, and my coffee was still warm. The taller officer asked if I was okay, and I said I had just finished a master's degree and had a job offer pending and had changed my locks because I needed privacy. His mouth twitched almost into a smile. He said they would file it as no concern and that if she called again, I could reference the visit. Before he left, he stopped at the door and said that sometimes when people finally start standing up for themselves, the people who were controlling them panic, and that it happens more than you would think. He left, and I locked the door behind him with my brand new lock and stood there shaking. Not from fear, but from fury. My mother had not just skipped my graduation. She had tried to use the police to drag me back into the cage. That was her mistake. 2 mornings later, I opened my banking app to check my balance and found 2 new credit inquiries, Capital One and Discover. Neither one was mine. Both accounts had been opened at a branch in Littleton, which was my parents' address. The balances were already climbing, and the transactions showed Cherry Creek Events and Denver DJ Agency and Glam Studio. I sat very still for a moment, and then I called Capital One. The woman on the line told me the account was opened in person at the Littleton branch and that the co-applicant was Linda M. Reed. My mother's name, my identity. She had not just asked me for $2,100. She had gone and taken it wearing my face. In Colorado, one-party consent means I could legally record any call I was part of. I turned on my voice recorder and dialed her number. She picked up on the 3rd ring, and her voice was sharp as she asked if I was alive. I told her I had found 2 credit cards under my name, both tied to her address, and asked if she wanted to explain that. She laughed. Actually laughed. She said she was helping me build credit and that I should be grateful and that the money went to Avery's party and that what was mine was ours and that I should stop being dramatic. I said what was mine and what was hers was currently under investigation. The silence on the line was instant and heavy and stunned. Then, I heard her quick inhale, followed by her saying, "I would not dare." I told her I already had, and then I ended the call and labeled the recording Boundaries, May 17th, and sent it to the bank. I chose a diner in Highlands Ranch for the meeting, neutral ground and public enough that no one could scream. They arrived 15 minutes late. Mom came first in a floral dress and sunglasses like armor for a battle she thought she had already won. Dad came behind her with his shoulders low. Avery came last with her phone in hand and never looked up. I slid a brown folder across the table before anyone sat down and told them there were 2 credit cards opened in my name and used for the party and that her signature was on both. Mom smiled with that practiced hollow smile and said she had done it for me and that it was for my credit history and that I should be thanking her. I told her she had forged my signature. She waved her hand and said it was family money and that I had always been so ungrateful and asked if I thought the world did not know who had paid for my education. I laughed a sharp sound that turned every head in the diner and told her she meant me and that I had paid for it with every check and every double shift and every loan she told me to take while she used my college fund for Avery's prom dress. Avery groaned and said, "Here we go again." I turned to her and told her that the silver dress she wore to her party and danced in had been bought on a card opened in my name. Her eyes darted away, and she said, Mom had told her I agreed. Mom's voice cut through, saying, I did not talk to my sister that way, and that she had not stolen from me and had only borrowed for the family. I told her quietly that she had used my identity and had called the police on me for changing my locks and had tried to paint me as unstable so she could keep control, and that it ended today. Dad finally spoke in a small voice, saying I should not blow this up and that they could fix it privately. I pushed the folder closer and told him there was no fixing it privately because the bank already knew and there was an open investigation and that Mom's signature and phone number and address were all on file and that she would be hearing from them soon. The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. Mom's eyes snapped up with all the color draining from her face as she asked what I had reported. I told her the fraud and said the accounts were frozen. She hissed that I would regret it and that I was destroying the family over a misunderstanding. I stood up and told her that she had destroyed it the moment she decided my name was worth more to her than my love. I left cash for my coffee on the table and walked out before she could answer. Outside, the air smelled like rain. I sat in my car for a long moment staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My hands were shaking, but my chest felt light and almost hollow in the way that could fill with peace. That night, Cherry Creek events glittered in purple and silver for Avery's big night. I was not invited, but I did not need to be because I already knew how it would end. At 8:45 p.m., my phone rang from an unknown number, and the woman on the line introduced herself as Lauren Stein from Capital One, Colorado, and told me the bank had escalated my fraud report and that their team had coordinated with local law enforcement to verify transactions that night at Cherry Creek events. She said I was not required to attend, but that they wanted me notified. I asked if they were sending officers to the venue, and she confirmed it was standard procedure. I thanked her and hung up and sat back, and through my open window, I could hear faint music drifting from downtown, a celebration about to unravel. 40 minutes later, a text came from Avery asking if I was insane and saying the police had just shown up and the DJ had stopped and everyone was staring and Mom was freaking out. Then another message came saying they were saying her name and that the bank guy had said my name and asking what I had done. I did not reply. Inside the venue, 2 officers entered through the main doors with no sirens and no drama, but with calm authority, cutting through the music. A bank representative followed, holding a folder thick with receipts. One officer said good evening and told the room they were there to verify a report of credit card fraud associated with the event and that the charges had been made using an account under the name Camilla Reed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd and cameras lifted. My mother stood near the cake table and the color left her face in a single second. She said there must be a mistake and her voice was trembling. The banker opened the folder and read aloud that the primary applicant was Linda M. Reed and that the cosigner was unauthorized and that the transaction records indicated misuse of another person's identity. Gasps moved through the room and someone whispered, asking if that was her daughter's name. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came. Avery stood in the center of the floor with her eyes wet and whispered, asking Mom what she had done. The officer said they were not arresting anyone that night and that it was just documentation for the bank's case, but that they would need copies of receipts and ID verification. In the silence that followed, the only sound was the flicker of camera flashes. The DJ unplugged his equipment, and the banner that read, "Avery's Sweet 16 Born to Shine," drooped in the humid air. The room emptied in slow waves of whispers and pity. By the time my mother stepped outside, the rain had begun to fall. Back in my apartment, I stood by the window and watched lightning pulse above the city. I did not smile and I did not cheer. I just let the quiet wrap around me. For years, I had thought silence was what weakness sounded like. That night, I realized it was victory. 3 days later, an email arrived from Capital One saying the fraud investigation had been resolved and that Linda M. Reed had acknowledged unauthorized use and agreed to repay the full balance. One sentence. No apology. Just the truth finally on paper. Word spread through Littleton the way small-town news always does, which is fast and slightly wrong, but directionally accurate. Avery's party video hit 500,000 views before she locked her accounts. I did not reply to any of their messages. Not from anger, but from exhaustion. I printed the final confirmation letter and pinned it on my wall right beside my framed diploma and the locksmith's receipt. 3 documents side by side. Proof of effort and proof of protection and proof of freedom. That night, I brewed tea and opened the window and let Denver's night air spill in. The city hummed below, alive and uncaring. For the first time, the silence did not hurt. It healed. 6 months later, I started a new job surrounded by people who saw me for what I had built and not for what I could give. On my wall hung 3 things, which were my diploma and my new employee badge and the old lock I had replaced. Together, they told one story of how I finally chose myself. If you have ever had someone treat your name like a resource and your love like a budget line and your boundaries like an inconvenience, then you already know how this story feels. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from because I want to know how many of us finally changed the locks.